Hello, welcome to the conference specials for Regen Ag Chat. My name's Genever.
And I'm Nic Renison.
So up first, we've got 4 podcasts which are focusing on speakers that are coming to do sessions at Carbon Calling, which is the 24th to the 26th of June. Tickets available at carboncalling.farm. I'm all over the plugs. I apologise. So first up is Jules Matthews, who you'll hear from the chat I met through Create. This was the first time Nic had met her. What did you think?
Well, I was relying on you saying, she's amazing. And thankfully, she was amazing. Thank the Lord. I love this chap. And she mentions the word human quite a lot. And I was thinking about this morning. And people say money makes the world go round. But I think love makes the world go round. So lots of all big decisions, if you think of the kind of big picture, are generally because of love relationships. And when she mentioned the human side, she mentions that quite a lot during the pod, and it just kind of hit home really. And I think she'll fit perfectly into Carbon Calling.
And I think as we sort of allude to within the chat, is that it's probably been a missing link, hasn't it, in what we've done before, in terms of, and that is not dismissing any of those speakers. They were of their time and they did an amazing job, but this just evolves it on a bit, I think, and gets to why people aren't necessarily making the changes that they want on farm.
But she's very much about tiny steps, bite-sized changes, and going at your pace. I just think she'll really resonate with the crowd, and obviously she's a woman, so that's good. I think both males and females will enjoy her story and her delivery. So it's going to be good, Liz.
Excellent. So she's speaking on the Wednesday. She's also speaking on the Thursday, and the plan is for her to be there on the Tuesday. So she's full exposure Carbon Calling. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to have a chat with her.
I get the impression she's quite good crack too.
Yeah, apart from she's given up drinking recently, but that doesn't infer that she can't be good crack without being drunk. But she has gone on a bit of a health, like focusing on her health recently. So that again will be interesting to listen.
Well, she might have a little night off, but yeah, I think she's going to fit in, and I think people will really enjoy it.
Hi, Jules. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. The main purpose of our chat is to basically talk a bit about what you're going to be up to at the upcoming Carbon Calling conference, which is you're attending on the 25th and the 26th of June. So in standard Nic question, tell us a bit about yourself.
It's always a great question, isn't it? And where and when do you start? You know, I think obviously I'm a New Zealander, although I did live out of New Zealand for close to 25 years. Some of that was actually in the UK, and most of it was in Canada and the US. I haven't always been in the agricultural industry, but most of my life has been spent somewhere in the ag industry, either, directly on livestock farms. I grew up firstly on a dairy farm and then a sheep and beef farm in New Zealand. And that was all I ever wanted to be. But, I did grow up in the 60s. And at that time, when you went to the careers advisor, you were given 3 options. One was a secretary. The other was a nurse or a teacher. And every time I said I wanted to be a farmer, I was told, no, that girls didn't do that. So anyway, I pushed on and did become a farmer through various transitions. And yeah, it's just something that I think both runs in my blood and warms my heart, being connected to the land. And I think I've always had a really deep connection. I remember as a child on our family farm, I used to spend all my time fantasizing about where I'd plant all the trees and what kind of trees I'd plant. And my dad had turned our farm into a wildlife refuge for birds. So he put like 7 or 8 different dams in, and so especially, well, duck shooting season was a busy time on the farm because all the ducks would come to our place to avoid the guns. So yeah, I think I left New Zealand because I had a brother, and my brother got the farm, and then have just transitioned through lots of different experiences, and living in the US was a really good one for me. I found people were perhaps more open to different thinking than I'd encountered in New Zealand. And they were also further along the road of destroying some of the environment. And so the focus was really different. So it didn't take me very long living in the US before I got involved in what then was sort of the grass-fed, grass-finished movement. And then in 2006, I came back to New Zealand. And part of coming back to New Zealand was I wanted to see how I stood up against what I thought were the best farmers in the world. And that was a bit of a rude awakening coming home to find that we were not even aware that there was a grass-fed, grass-finished movement in the world. Although that was what we were doing, we didn't realise we weren't awake to the fact that there was a marketing opportunity. And I think New Zealand contributed a lot of good stuff to agriculture, but we've also limited ourselves in this country by thinking and believing we're the best farmers in the world. And I think that's posed a lot of challenges, and it's why a lot of Kiwis leave New Zealand, is they're looking for sort of a broader scope of thinking. That's probably a bit mean. I'm not exactly saying all New Zealanders are narrow-minded, but yeah, so lots of different types of agriculture, from really big, extensive places that run, 100,000 stock units, that'll be sheep and beef, down to some pretty intensive, worked in the dairy industry a little bit, and certainly have worked in the cropping industry of growing market gardens and in the States, large scale organic produce production. So got a real variety of things and places. What else can I tell you, Liz?
Sorry, just going back to your question about your answer about farmers always thinking they're the best in the world. I think UK farmers think they're the best, don't they? We're always.
I think we can because I've hosted some New Zealand farmers who've come to visit the UK, and I think the UK farmers can sometimes have a bit of a scale issue. So like the New Zealanders come over and talk about things in thousands, and we go, oh yeah, it's just. And then I always remember from New Zealand is they always take you up to the hill and like show you everything that is theirs. And we I'm not sure. I think some of it is the scale thing. Sometimes there is a little bit of insecurity about that.
Yeah. And I think, look, as a Kiwi, that is something I can say I'm really proud of. We have developed really good systems to manage livestock at scale. And I think a lot of that has been good. Some of it has probably been a little detrimental insofar as when you get huge numbers, it can become somewhat impersonal. And I think the invention of things like farm bikes and, side-by-sides and four-wheelers and all of that, we've changed the pace at which we work with our livestock, and I think that's definitely to our detriment, especially in the relationship we have. If you're walking or riding a horse and you're working with your stock, you're just naturally going at the same pace as them, rather than trying to push them along with a piece of equipment and then, usually in New Zealand with a big noisy hunt-away dog. The other bit, Liz, I take where I am now, I take everyone to the top of the hill, and it's 300 or 400 meters to the top of the hill, and then you get this fabulous view of the South Island and Mana Island and Kapiti Island and the Tasman Sea. So there's good reason to go up the hill. Definitely.
Yeah, but it's always those ones I remember, which is like you can see they're like to the furthest horizon and then a bit more. That's what we. Yeah, there's a little element of cock waving occasionally. Some would suggest.
Oh well, you can include me in that then. We won't go there.
We digress. So yeah, so the excitement of you are the first female headliner we've got at Carbon Calling. So that in itself is quite exciting. It's interesting. We've just recently seen another agenda that's come out for a similar regenerative conference that's happening a bit earlier than us. And there's 2 women on the program and about 15 or so male speakers. So we're quite proud of what, in terms of Carbon Calling, is trying to put we're making a fuss about it. We shouldn't. It should just be a diverse group of people, but I'm just quite proud of what we're up to. So I include that in inviting you in for this year's.
Thank you. And I do think that, and I hear this sometimes, and not uncommonly anymore, from some of the guys I hang out with, and I think they are really learning to appreciate a different perspective on how we see land and how we interface with it. And I do think it's fairly natural for women to bring a more nurturing, inclusive view of what we're doing and why we're doing it. I don't have children, but I feel like wherever I go, whatever land I'm working with, it's more about the relationship that you have with that land than the result. The results come out of the relationship.
And I think the Carbon Calling audience is also, I'd say it was probably 50-50 as well. So
yeah,
we kind of are very conscious, I guess, because we're organising it, that it's a place that women feel very comfortable and it's just completely normal. Whereas I know when I go to an auction, there's always a sprinkling of women, but it's predominantly men. And I don't mind it, but I think some people probably do find it a little bit, a lot of men.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there may be some women there, but very seldom do you see the women bidding on stock.
Mm.
And I can think back to, I would have been 20, I think, and I worked in the dairy industry as a herd tester. And one of the farms I went to had 3 farms. He had 2 dairy farms and a sheep and beef farm. And I used to go with another dairy farmer who bred sheepdogs and go and help him muster. And one day I said to this guy, "Oh, you're doing a really bad job." I was young and cocky. And he actually said, "Oh, do you think you could do better?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he took me on a share basis. So I worked there part-time, but the idea was I was going to help him get his stock and his production up to snuff, and I would do a bit of buying and selling of stock and take a percentage of it. And so here I was as a young 20-year-old going to livestock auctions and markets and bidding on stock. And, that was, you just really didn't see women there at all. You certainly didn't see a young woman buying something, But he gave me the checkbook and let me go. And it was a great learning curve. So huge appreciation for that opportunity.
And did you do a better job?
I did. I made a lot of money, and it's at that point was when I went to my father and I said, "I've got enough money to stock the farm," and I could have stocked the farm with 1,000 ewes. So I had enough money to buy 1,000 ewes outright. And my dad said to me at that point, he actually laughed and said, "No, the farm's for your brother," who was a mechanic and not interested in farming. So, long story short, my dad and I worked that one out, but it's always, stuck as a bit of a sadness that because of your sex, you don't get certain opportunities. And I still think it happens quite a bit, which is a lost opportunity for many families.
But on a positive note, in a couple of weeks, you're jumping on a plane and you're coming to Carbon Calling, and then you're going to Groundswell.
Yes.
And then are you just hanging around for a bit, or what's your plans?
Yeah, I've only got 3 weeks. God, I'd rather have 3 months, but I do have a bit to manage here. So yeah, I have a little bit of time, and I've left it very open because I know opportunities to go and visit and look at various places will come up, and there's a few people I want to see, particularly people from the Create course that we did there.
Liz, do you want to just talk a little bit about Create? Because that's how you met, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Nicole Masters, so her company in Integrity Soils, they run roughly a year-long program for consultants or advisors who sort of want to be trained up to become agroecological, I can never say that word, coaches in agroecology-ish. I'm terrible this evening. I should never do podcast recordings on an evening. So there was, I want to say 16 of us, but I think there was more than that. And so we all met at Althorpe Hall, and then we did a week intensive at the beginning, and then did every other week Zoom calls, and then did a residential at the end. So it was an incredibly intense experience in a good way, but it was that good combination of technical content and how you approach it, and how do you get farmers engaged, and also how do you get yourself ready to put yourself out there. So it was it was a really broad ranging sort of range of topics, I suppose.
Has it been life-changing, Liz? I think it probably has, hasn't it?
Yes, I suppose I've been talking to a couple of the guys recently, and a lot of them are using the information they've learned a lot, like in almost every day. They're working with people with some of the materials that we learn. I use it within my work, but it wouldn't be as probably as a higher proportion of other people. But I'm still, I was really glad I did it and had the opportunity. The bit I used more probably was a lot more about the self-reflection bit, the importance of that, understanding what you could have done better without going into too much I'm a terrible person, and also how like coaching approaches with farmers. So I am building a lot more of that into what I do now, because you get so much more interesting information from it when you ask them in a different way.
I think, if I may add to that too, I think if you look back in time, because I met Nicole in, I think it was 2011, and it didn't take long before we started doing various things together. And over time, the reason Create got developed was what we saw was there were people with technical knowledge, especially on the sort of mainstream side of things. There were people who would have a lot of technical knowledge about fertilizers and chemicals and use of and applications. There were some people who had a reasonable knowledge about the biological side of how to approach things. But then there was the human side as well. There was the coaching side. And so Nicole and I actually got to know each other a lot sort of through the coaching side of stuff. I used to run a leadership program that she'd done or did with me. And then we realized that how do we put that you needed all those aspects. You needed the technical side, you needed the biological, physical, practical side of farming, and you also needed the human side of it if you were going to be really effective in helping people make change. Because I think we're all aware that change is a necessary, and it's a given in the world. Things are always changing. Nature's always changing. It's successional. But to enable people to embrace it and to be able to come beside them and help them understand all those different aspects, and in particular, where they are the limiting factor. Create was developed as a way to coach people and train people to be able to provide that to the agricultural community, across the world, ideally. So it is an intense program, and it's not for the faint of heart. And I think, generally speaking, the results that come out of it are pretty remarkable. I know my own learning inside that program has been life-changing.
And I think it's also that, because it is such an intense experience, the people that you met on that, that were on that course together, do you mean we've always got that shared experience? So you might not be in contact with them for a few weeks or months, or you might bump into them something, but you're instantly back in that, happens to be the ballroom at Althorpe, but you're back in that space again. And it was also the opportunity to do the course at Althorpe was
pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think it's that thing of growing together. I think when we grow together as human beings and we're prepared to be vulnerable and to say, look, I don't know, help me find out, or let me find out. Or I think, we've been, and I often say this, when you go to school, the person who gets the reward or the accolades is the person who puts their hand up with the right answer. I'm more interested in who's asking the question and why are they asking the question. What is the question we need to ask here of ourselves and of each other, or of the land? What is required here, rather than, oh, yeah, I know, and being the smart one.
So I'm just thinking, so if there's farmers out there, or land managers, or people who are thinking of coming to Carbon Calling, and up until now, I guess we've had, our main speakers have been probably more, they've been farmers, but they've been kind of slightly telling us what to do. This is the way you graze. And I guess it's moving from more of a consultant to a more coaching, let's have a think about this together, of how we can think about things differently. And I guess it's and Liz is moving into this area now, but it's going from consultancy more to coaching. Can you just explain that a little bit?
I think as a consultant or an advisor, people tend to come down the driveway and they'll assess your situation and give you an action plan or some strategies or things to do. When you come at it as a coach, it's more an inquiry into really getting to understand what matters to that person, both short-term and long-term, because, those decisions we make short-term do have long-term implications. So really finding out what's important to people, and not just what's important to them regarding the farm, but what's important to them to the rest of their life. Do they have family? Do they have kids? Do they want the kids to come home to the farm? What are all those questions that we need to, or those aspects of life that we need to dig into, so that we can better understand the trajectory that somebody might want to travel? And then what are the limiting factors? Is it their understanding of grazing management? Is it their understanding of biological processes? Is it their inability to say no to somebody who comes down the driveway as an expert and tells them that the farm's going to fail if they don't put on, 200 kg of superphosphate every year? So it's sort of stepping back a little bit and getting that broader picture, so that you can stand shoulder to shoulder and see what someone's dealing with through their eyes as much as you can, and then bring your own experience to help them see it newly or differently.
And do you think confidence, what do you think holds people back? Are you giving people belief that they can actually make change? Like, what's a common kind of stall?
I think understanding. I think once we understand better, we can be more confident that we are making good choices, and also giving people confidence to try something new on a scale that's not frightening. You know, if you're going to try something new, just do it over here. Do one paddock, do one flock, you know, do one mob of sheep or whatever you're doing. Just treat them a little differently or graze them a little different and see what happens. I think in the farming community, one of the biggest things we tend to bump up against is our concern about what others think. And I think the Australians did a very interesting study around farmers and people and what enabled them to change. And often it's not data. People think it's, you know, show me the numbers, and there's a lot of numbers out there that we can show numbers for anything. We can prove this point or that point, and we can go either way with it. But I think and I've encountered this with some farmers here, they start making those changes and then they go down to the local restaurant or the local pub and they feel ridiculed. And it does take some broad shoulders to do different than those around you. And so how do we support people in that? Because otherwise we get stuck in the same, doing, you know, more of the same, expecting a different outcome. So yeah. I think considering the human factor is really big in all of this.
And I think as Nic alluded to, this during your invite was a counter to the previous speakers, which it was a very different approach, which is how do you and do you mean we talk about context, don't we? But and sometimes that's to do with the climate and all of that. But a lot of the speakers that have come through don't really take into consideration the human factors that sit beside some of that, and just believe that, the telling will finally, do you mean, beat people in submission, and that both Nic and I have worked previously in knowledge exchange programs, which is you can say this. Do you mean all of us have said the same thing for decades, but stuff hasn't moved on. So there's something else that we're not taking into consideration, and that's the human side.
But it's interesting. It's what. So we had a chap recently. He came around just to see us, and he's just starting to change. He is the most traditional farmer I know, and he's just starting to change. And it might take him the rest of his farming life to kind of make any big changes. But he got quite excited about seeing a butterfly, and it was just enough to make him. It's funny, isn't it? What the little bits that get people going, and I guess you just got to keep giving them the opportunity till they grab something. Is that what you do?
Yeah, and to not make. I think the biggest thing is stop making ourselves and others wrong. You know, I often say, look, farmers have been doing the best they can do with the information they've had. And I look at farming in New Zealand, you know, they've been doing what they've been told is best practice. And, you know, the applications of fertilizer and upping your cow numbers and feeding palm kernel and, you know, chasing production on all of that has been led not by farmers, but by industry. And, you know, we used to have, you know, independent research in New Zealand, and we tend not to anymore. Most of it's funded by industry, so it's a bit skewed. So how do we support people to have what we call those little light bulb moments? And is it, you know, digging a hole in the ground and seeing that, you know, all their roots are sheared off at, you know, an inch or 2 or 50 millimeters, or whichever language you're talking. You know, what are those little light bulb moments? What are the occasions we can create for people in conversation and in action when we're out in the field, so that they can ask questions and start to see differently. Because we can change what we do, but fundamentally, when we change how we see the world, that is when we affect meaningful change. And there are a lot of farmers here who think New Zealand's already doing a very good job in the regenerative framework because, we incorporate livestock. And if you take the principles of regen ag from America, where they haven't had livestock, we can go, we tick that box. And so therefore we are. And it's like, no, wait a minute. If you look at our water quality and our soil loss and our food quality and our animal health problems and our human health problems, we are not. So let's start where we are and go, there is nothing wrong. How can we do better as human beings is the question we're really trying to ask and answer. And I think that's what gives me goosebumps, is how do we do better and how do we collectively do better, linking arms rather than being positional and therefore oppositional, going, I'm right, you're wrong. It's like, no, we've all got some ideas here. Let's figure out what works at a local level before we go to a regional level and a national level and an international level. But we've got to do the work. So, I'm hoping people are coming because they want to do the work, and the work happens over here where we are.
And it just triggered a memory of that. We had the one piece of negative feedback we got from last year's conference is the one I remember, obviously, which was something about, well, I might not come again because I didn't learn anything new. And it's like, and we're like, we've established we've established this day and all of that to provide a support network, and then that made me think, actually we're not necessarily supporting that curiosity and the desire to find new things in everything that we can encounter in the world. And that's also, I suppose, part of the driver, but just a slightly different approach. And then you touched on the animal health, human health, soil. So that's another area of your I appreciate is completely how you work is linking those the microbial bridge. So you're going to be talking a bit about that too. So can you just talk us, explain that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't not connect it. I had the pleasure of working with a guy named Ben Warren, who's a clinical nutritionist in New Zealand, and formed a company called Be Pure. And Ben was a professional golfer, and he had a lot of physical back problems and things like that. And then he got really interested in nutrition. And then he got interested in what were the missing trace elements in New Zealanders' diets that were instrumental in, some of the health issues we face here. And that was a good learning time in my life, and also a time when I transitioned. I was somebody whose back was so buggered from years of farming I couldn't roll over in bed at night. And now I can do anything. So, I went from being somebody who thought I had to give up physically working because I was so broken to somebody who can go out and shear sheep and, drive fence posts and do all the things that we farmers love doing. And so I think that was a time for me of really connecting that there is no distance between my health and the health of the land, therefore the health of the soil. They are one of the same thing. And the sooner we can really get our hands around that and find ways of effectively managing that for good outcomes, then the better off we will be, both as farmers and as people in our communities.
It'll link well with we've got a doctor coming, Dr. David Unwin, who is called the low carb doctor, and he's just got loads of his patients off diabetes drugs. And also chap who makes cheese. He's he sells cheese, doesn't he? What's his called list? Andy Swinscoe. And he's all about helping farmers set up small cheese making businesses, and then the kind of amazing nutritional content of like just proper cheese, proper food. So
I'm
it'll all
excited.
link in. I know it'll all link in, I think.
Yeah. And I think it does.
Is he bringing cheese? Is the second question.
Oh, we maybe need to work on that. I don't know whether we've asked that question, but I think we should. But Jules, I need my back is awful at the minute, so I maybe need a little quiet moment with you and tell you what. I
think just really briefly on that, the thing I had discovered when I was in America, I lived on a little island called Lopez Island, and I would buy sheep from off island, and they always came with horrendous foot rot and foot problems. And I ended up getting copper poisoning because I used to use copper tox all the time. And then I got really thinking about it, and I used to go to Acres USA and Stockman Grass Farmer conferences. And pretty soon I linked the minerals that were associated with foot problems. And then I started feeding those minerals, zinc and copper and things like that. And so I managed to understand that a physical problem in an animal could be fixed nutritionally, but I hadn't made the link that the physical problem in my body could be fixed nutritionally. And I think once our bodies have the building blocks, it's amazing what repair can happen. And that was, we can talk more about that, but I think that's instrumental, both on a soil level, a plant level, an animal level, a human level. Do we have the building blocks, and how are those building blocks being made available nutritionally and microbially? Because, all our nutrition comes to us microbially as well through our gut microbiome. And it's the same for the plant and the soil. So how do we connect all that, and how do we elevate the functionality of that so that we promote and enjoy good health across the board? I'm all for that.
And we're sort of getting hints of it here, aren't we? So there's a few initiatives that are sort of looking at it, but a lot of the time when I suppose we do talk a bit about nutrient density, but then it's that next step on in terms of human health, like enhancing health.
Yeah. It's just the whole big agri-food business doesn't want this conversation to happen. So
no, there's no money. There's no money in healthy people. There's no money in healthy livestock and healthy land for those who profit from the farmers. And, if we put our resources into growing healthy land and healthy human beings, a lot of those concerns we have on national levels, New Zealand's health services are in really poor shape. And, people are struggling to get the care they need. And it's because the demand is so high because we're sick. We're sick.
Well, Jules, I'm really looking forward to you coming over. Can't wait.
Good. Me too.
It's quite rustic. It's not fancy.
Well, I live in a wool shed, so, rustic
You'll
is
fit right in.
I will fit way in.
But do have, for some reason, we do have incredible loos, don't we? We hire these loos.
That's good.
And there's a shower that you can have. You can have a shower with swallows.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like the real thing?
Yeah, the real thing.
Okay.
Just have to hose off the bird shit before you start. But other than that, you're fine.
They are my favourite bird. And in my wool shed, the outside area, I've left it so all the swallows can continue to do their nesting because they're such fabulous wee birds.
Oh, they're amazing.
Well, Nick, you were saying yours are struggling it's been really dry here. So to get the mud.
Well, they're the house martins. So we're just by our back door. There's all house martins, and they kind of come back and they kind of mend their nests from the previous year, but the nests are just falling down because it's so dry. We haven't had rain for 2 months.
Wow.
I don't know. Over 2 months.
And then last year you just never had sun. You had nothing but rain.
So Reno, so you're coming here for day 3 of the third day of Carbon Calling, and Reno's slightly worried that it's going to look a bit like a desert. But we've got rain at the weekend, so fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, it will be what it will be. And I think, again, what you're pointing to is we are encountering more swings that go further left and right, or dry and wet, or whichever way you want to go. And how do we create a better buffer across our systems? Because whether we like it or not, or agree with it, or think it is what it is, change is coming.
And the debate I did a farmer meeting today, and the idea of don't make decisions when we're in panic mode. Do you mean we're panic moded because we're dry? But then you look back over the last probably 6 springs, and they haven't been normal, aka showers in April, really good growth in certain bits there have been. So it's not like all of our systems are still reliant on that pattern. And so it is about us. It's not panicking, is it? It's just exploring, or what are the things we need to then think about next. And a lot.
Yeah, and how do you build in a buffer? People look at how do they build in a buffer as they age. They might have some savings or own their own home or whatever, but how do we build in a buffer in our agricultural system? That's where the whole organic matter and carbon and our ability to infiltrate and hold water and build that buffer into our landscapes, whether it's planting trees or promoting diversity or whatever that is, but identifying what are those critical areas to take action, and then what are the actions that will give us the results we're looking for, and then how do we measure and monitor that so that actually we know we're going in the right direction, rather than just some ad hoc, I'll plant a cover crop because that's what you're supposed to do. I think we need to pay attention to the results we're getting and ensure that we're actually going in the right direction.
Good job you're here for 2 days. There's going to be a lot to talk about.
Good job. I'm here for 3 weeks. I'm so
true.
looking forward to this. It's like you're not going to get rid of me in a hurry.
Are you off to see some dogs while you're here? Because you're very much.
Well, I haven't sorted that out yet, but I'll probably just land and get my feet and then sort out what I'm going to do.
Do you travel well? Are you a season?
I do. Yeah. I'm an easy traveller. I'm a pretty good sleeper. Again, didn't used to be. But yeah, doing the right things has your body working the right way, I find. So no, I love traveling. I'm easy. Just give me some food and water and a bed to lie down and I'm good to go.
We won't need a rider for your bedroom. It's fine. You'll be in a caravan outside. It'll all be good. You joke. It might have to be that, but no, it's fine. But thank you very much, Jules. We'll see you in a few weeks.
You will. It's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the Regen Ag podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tim Nicholson from Cactus Tree Guards, Reno for the music, and Pete Ord, the podcast wizard from the studio at Sunbeams, part of the Annie Mawson Sunbeams Music Trust. See you next time.